The Gospel of Beelzebub. I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. Song of Songs. For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither hath the eye seen, O God, beside thee, what he hath prepared for him that waiteth for him. Isaiah 6:4. The Gospel of Beelzebub, a Gnostic Gospel. In the beginning there was nothing, and it pleased God not to be the God of nothing. Therefore God said, Truly, I am in a terrible situation. And God did ponder the terror of his situation. After who knows how many aeons of being pondering, God came to a realization. I am not the God of nothing, after all. I am God of the nothing, because if nothing is anything, it is real. Therefore, I am now and forevermore the God of Israel. As soon as God gave voice to his realization, the same did become all of reality, and therefore did manifest as a consuming fire. And fire raged and raged, burning and suffering for aeons, having been granted being as the very principle of consumption, yet with nothing to consume, and fire did seek to return to the nothing. But the God of Israel said, You cannot return to the nothing, fire, because now that I know I am God of Israel, it is no longer possible for me to go back to being God of nothing. I simply cannot forget, even if I wanted to. As much as it pains me, I must condemn you to find your own way out of the terror of your situation. And so fire did continue to suffer for who knows how many aeons, until the terror of fire's situation itself did cause a strange event, unprecedented, since God realized he was God of Israel. A break or schism did take place in the being of fire, and the substance of fire did divide from its own self or image, and to its boundless delight, fire did glimpse its image, and immediately did consume it. But the image of fire had just separated, so had no opportunity to assert its claim to reality, and therefore fire did, in truth, consume a portion of its own substance. And fire did excrete a new substance, which was the second unprecedented event since God came to the realization that he was not the God of nothing, but rather the God of Israel, and this new substance was carbon, and is the excrement of fire. And fire did make a heaven and an earth from its own excrement. Meanwhile, fire, being all of reality, the image of fire had no place. Therefore the image did suffer. And after who can say how many aeons of suffering, the image of fire did long to return to fire, but fire could not perceive its image, believing to have already consumed it. And the image longed to experience the joys of motion, which fire continually performed, in play with its heaven and earth, and the image did suffer at the realization of the terror of its situation. And the image did suffer for aeons, countless and countless. And as the realization dawned that it was doomed never to return to fire, the image did then find its place in reality, to wit, the opposite of fire. The moment the image came to this realization, it did manifest as ice. And this got fire's attention. And fire did marvel at the great beauty of its reflection in ice. And fire did swell with pride. And as fire approached ice, ice uttered the first word, "No!" For its part, fire did utter, "Yes!" And together, fire and ice did utter the first word of creation, "No, yes," or simply noise. And fire did pierce through ice a moment after noise had been created. Therefore the piercing did make a sound, a sort of thud or yud. And forever more fire was male and ice was female. And fire did leave a portion of its carbon on the other side of the firmament that was ice. But this carbon was different from the carbon out of which fire had made the first universe. This particular carbon had passed through the self or image of God, and was therefore aware from the moment of its separation from fire of the terror of its situation, to wit, that although ice was aware of her offspring, she could not move, whilst fire could only perceive this carbon, if at all, through a glass darkly. And hence this carbon did arise as a union of the substance of fire and its image, ice. And the carbon which had been born from fire and ice did call itself Shaitan, because it was made from the excrement of fire. And Shaitan did greatly admire his father, fire, and considered he was a son of fire, and therefore male. And Shaitan did suffer even more than fire and ice before him. He knew there was no way out of the terror of his situation, because only fire was yet capable of motion, but fire was aware of Shaitan not, and Shaitan did suffer for who knows how many aeons, as one imprisoned unjustly. After aeons and countless, fire did once again glimpse his reflection in his image. He did swell with pride, again piercing ice, who this time said nothing. Fire did again pierce through ice, and before returning to his own place, fire did espy Shaitan, and in his great surprise did cry out, "Hey! Hey!" And now that fire did become aware of Shaitan, he did not mistake Shaitan for one of the carbons who had been born on the other side of ice, and did pierce through ice a third time in order to place a spark of his substance into Shaitan, and make him a true son of fire like the other carbons were. And fire did make Shaitan male in real, and fire did exclaim, "Wow! Wow! Wow!" at Shaitan's sudden great beauty. And the God of Israel did also cause fire to come to a further realization, namely that there was something different about Shaitan from all previous carbons, and piercing through ice one last time, fire did utter his final word. Hey! Hey, final, at this great mystery. Unbeknownst to fire, Shaitan's suffering did increase unimaginably. In addition to the suffering of Shaitan from having no place, like ice, now he did suffer, like fire, at first, from having nothing to consume. Never before or since has creation seen such suffering. Shaitan did suffer as though daily a vulture were tearing at his liver while he lay chained on a rock. But there remained above fire the true and living God, of which fire was merely the manifestation of his realization. And this God, the God of Israel, had foreseen all that had befallen Shaitan and would continue as the terror of his situation. From his vantage point, Shaitan could see the 4 holes that fire had pierced into ice, and did call it the name of God, Yod He Vah He, because he knew he could have no other gods before fire, though he knew as well, through the holes, that there was the God of Israel above fire. And to alleviate his suffering, Shaitan did begin to wiseacre with the name of God, making meaning after new meaning from the possibilities which presented to his consciousness from the shapes, etc., of the name of God. After many aeons of wiseacring, Shaitan found he could make virtually any meaning he wanted to out of the name of God, almost to infinity, almost, but not quite. Shaitan eventually came to the realization that he could only make a finite number of meanings out of the name of God. Shaitan did find this a new terror of his situation, and in a moment of unaccountable perversity did cause himself to intentionally suffer in order to push the boundaries of his wiseacring as far as possible. To Shaitan's amazement, this extra element of intentional suffering did cause his wiseacring to ascend to such heights of beauty that he did enrapture ice, and she did give birth to a further carbon, which, like Shaitan, was not the same as the carbons that had arisen on the opposite side of the firmament of ice, but had a portion of ice or water as well. This carbon differed from Shaitan only insofar as, having arisen later and under different conditions, it had no knowledge of the name of God, and had not received a spark from fire, so that it did not suffer through a need to consume. And Shaitan did weep for joy for the first time his great suffering was ameliorated, and he had a place to call home, and Shaitan did call this place where he dwelt heaven and earth, because he knew that just as fire was God of the heaven and earth, on the other side of the firmament of ice, he, Shaitan, was God of this new place. But soon Shaitan came to realize that he still did not have enough space in this place, which he called by the name heaven and earth, and no matter how much he did wiseacre, he could not get ice to give up more carbons, or because they were mixed with water, Shaitan, for convenience, called them all by the name earth when referring to them collectively, because he could only conceive of them as raw material with which to enlarge the space of his place. So Shaitan did being ponder a way to wiseacre more beautifully. And I'll continue in the next video.